So we conclude our series on the fruit of the Spirit. Paul wrote the words to the churches of Galatia. Now, I don't know whether you agree, but truthfully, for me, the series turned out better than what I expected. Because if you fashion a sermon on a specific word, it's an interesting process. And from my perspective, the sermons often sound repetitive. Okay, I'll just say it, boring. One word sermons get boring. But I don't know whether that's really been the case. And I think that's true because the Spirit has been close, very close, helping us to listen and be attentive. So for the last time, let me say that the phrase fruit of the Spirit is a biblical phrase that sums up 9 visible attributes of Christ-like living. It is something we embody, something that we live out together in our journey of faith. We looked at love and joy and patience and peace and kindness, generosity, faithfulness and gentleness, and now it is self-control. And in the Greek, self-control is derived from 2 words. Katros means strength, and means in strength, inward strength, rather than physical strength. Self-control is the ability to override or change one's inner response, as well as to interrupt undesirable behaviors or tendencies, or refrain from acting on them. Self-control, or self-discipline, if you like, both mean the same thing, means having the mental strength and the attitude to consciously do the things you know you must do, even if you don't want to do them. It's a daily discipline, this self-control. It's the controlling of yourself to do what is right, what is best. To reach your vision and dreams, you must have this sense of self-control and discipline. Now, the Apostle Paul identifies self-control or self-discipline as a fruit of the Spirit, as an attribute in which we embody to live Christ-like. And it is included for a reason in this list. Because self-control matters in just about every part of our lives. Self-control comes from the frontal cortex, right here. The place where executive functioning resides. God gave us the brain. Gave us executive functioning to think and to act and to share. And that all comes from the frontal lobe. So Karen and I are this afternoon are heading out to meet some folks from Pine Shores to do a few visits to a vineyards in Napa Valley. So I'm going to need all the self-control that I can muster. Because, I don't think Iowa is what heaven must be like. But that whole Napa region, vineyard after vineyard after vineyard after vineyard after that is what heaven must be like. Now, I just think it's really humorous that God, on the day that we leave for Napa, the sermon is on self-control. Now, for those of you who wonder, and in spite of what other people tell you, I'm far from being perfect. It may seem like that to you, but I have a few quirks, and I have some faults and some failures. I can get myself into trouble pretty easy, and that's not bragging. That's revealing and being vulnerable. Self-control is a fruit of the Spirit I need to work on most. And the Apostle Paul wants people of faith to have self-control. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, the Apostle Paul wrote about bringing every thought into capacity to the obedience of Christ. In a very basic way, self-control means thinking before reacting or responding. Now, what's that old bumper sticker I used to make, joke about? What would Jesus do? That question is the kind of portal into the process of regulating our actions. And remember what Viktor Frankl once said, that between stimulus and response there is a space. And in that space is the power to choose our response. It is in that space that we can be empowered to live by principle rather than impulse, desire, or even social custom. Self-control helps us to live more Christ-like. Now, here's a few things that self-control does to help you. It keeps in check self-destructive, addictive, obsessive, and compulsive behavior. You write all this down for those who need to hear it. Not saying that any of you all need it. Self-control gives you a sense of command over your life and brings some balance into it. Self-control helps you to keep over-emotional response in check, or at least in moderation. It eliminates the feelings of helplessness and being too dependent. Self-control helps to manifest mental and emotional objectivity, which contributes to peace of mind and heart and body. Self-control strengthens your self-esteem, your confidence, inner strength, and your willpower. It empowers you, enables you to take charge of your life. It makes you more responsible and more trustworthy. So that's a pretty cool list of benefits. And the Apostle Paul knew that the benefits of self-control help people of faith. So have any of you ever heard of a gentleman named Walter Mischel? You might know him by his nickname Marshmallow Man. Anybody at all? Well, this will be fun. Well, Walter Mischel was an Ivy League professor known for experiments on self-control. And so nearly 50 years ago, he created a test to see how various 5-year-olds would respond to being left alone with a marshmallow for 15 minutes with the instructions not to eat it. And with the promise that if they didn't eat it, they would be given 2. Now, famously, preschoolers who waited the longest for marshmallows went on to have higher SAT scores than the ones who could not wait. In later years, they were thinner, earned more advanced degrees, used less cocaine, and coped better with stress. Now, us marshmallow kids are now in our mid-50s. And now the study is whether they are becoming wealthier. So, Mr. Mischel wants to make sure, and this is the key, that the nervous parents, all your parents of the 5th graders who are nervous because your kid wanted that lollipop right now, should not miss the key finding, because here's what it said. Whether you eat the marshmallow at age 5 isn't your destiny, because self-control can be taught. And here's what the science says about people with high self-control have better grades, and they attribute this to the fact that people with poor self-control are likely to procrastinate on tasks, which often lead to poorer performance or lower grades. People with high self-control show fewer less control problems, such as binge eating or alcohol abuse. They show better psychological adjustments, including obsessive-compulsive patterns, depression, anxiety, hostility. And people with high self-control show a greater sense of acceptance. Okay, we okay, I need to take this attribute of self-control more seriously. Because I wonder if Paul didn't list self-control last for a reason. Because I don't know whether you can embody the other 8 attributes if you don't have self-control. Would it not almost be impossible to visibly live out the qualities of love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and generosity and gentleness and faithfulness without having self-control, discipline? So I just think the Apostle Paul knew exactly what he was doing by listing it last. If we are to follow Christ, we need to be disciplined, to have control, self-control with our words, self-control with our actions, self-control with our priorities and our passions and our resources, self-control with our brains and our bodies and how we care for each other. We need a certain amount of self-control to be like Christ, to live like Christ. And if you hear nothing else, hear this. Self-control is linked to better relationships, better family cohesion and less conflict in your relationship. And it is linked to better empathy. Somerset Maugham, the author of Human Bondage, wrote these words a long time ago. He writes, self-control might be as passionate and as active as the surrender to passion. What an interesting thought, a powerful thought for us to ponder. Okay, so any guesses on what is the most effective practice that will strengthen your self-control? It's not medication, it's meditation. I didn't make it up, read it on the internet. And Dr. Weller didn't pay me to say that, but meditation helps strengthen your self-control because our minds are so restless. And when our thoughts are driven by restlessness or anxiety or fear or compulsion, we are more likely to act on those. So we have to regulate our thoughts. We have to learn how to breathe, to be more effective and less reactive. Find a balance between those fight and flight responses that are so common in the way that we act. So when you meditate, when you breathe, your body naturally increases a hormone in your brain. And that allows you to relax. That allows you to get back to your executive functioning. Now, this is all what God did for us. God gave us the ability to function in the executive part of our brain. And when we learn how to relax our body, we get back online. So both science and both experience says the same thing, that if we devote some time each and every day to meditation, to simply focus on our breathing, you will become more under control. You will have more self-control. Now, who would have ever thought that the ancient practice of meditation would be so helpful for us today? Us so very busy Christians. So I just invite you to make a commitment to focus on your breathing, to meditate, to get your feet back on higher ground. Paul says, self-control is a fruit of the Spirit. It is a core value in this beloved place. It leads, it will help us to live more Christ-like.